once and fragile maid. You are a warrior.
I love the King Arthur legend, but I've always sort of resented how it kind of sidelines most of its women. So how did you feel about the chance to finally center a female perspective in a world like this?
It was really exciting. And like you said, to me, it was so shocking when I was doing a lot of my prep work. I basically just tried to watch as many of the Arthurian legend references and renditions that we have. And it just kind of solidified the reality that although we are so familiar with this legend and it's literally been told for hundreds and hundreds of years, we very seldom, if ever, dive into the female characters, particularly, for the Lady of the Lake, who is this powerful and iconic figure in the Arthurian legends. It just felt like a very exciting opportunity, not only to be able to tell her story, but I think also to bring to light the story of a true heroine and to acknowledge a woman's journey to becoming a hero with all of the obstacles that are specific to that.
Yeah, I love all the strong imagery you get around Nimue here. Like she's standing on a rock and wielding the sword. She's protecting her people. Like, what was it like for you to sort of reenact that kind of iconic, you see that with men all the time, but never with a woman.
It's so funny because this role in general, it's so different to anything that I've done before, not only in terms of the genre, but in terms of the vast skill set that I had to learn in a quick period of time. And even shooting, there are challenges that are specific to a fantasy and epic piece that really aren't applicable for other kind of genres. So it was really interesting, when we were trying to decide on the sword, what the sword should look like, because it was handcrafted. They were passing me all of these swords we were so lucky, but they gave me all these swords from, like, I was testing these different swords out and they were like, this is Russell Crowe's, this is Chris Pine's, this is Timothy Chalamet's, this is like this person's, but it was like this character Nimue, it's the first time they're crafting a sword for a queen, for a woman. And I think when that happened and we were trying these swords and when we were looking at different armors, there really aren't that many roles where these women are put at the epicenter of these legendary tales. So I think just to be able to kind of reenact that, although it's something that I'm still so new to and learning, and I would love to learn more of, not just the skill set, but also this world and this genre. It felt incredible and so empowering. And I'm really thankful that I was able to be a part of something like this.
One of the things I thought was most interesting is that when we first meet your Arthur, he's not really what you would call like once and future king material. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey that he goes on over the course of the show?
I see him as a character that was a young mercenary, someone who just tried to get by, especially as we discover more about his story. We start understanding that he is someone who didn't have the best luck going forward, didn't have the best cards dealt to him. So he's someone who's just always had to get by, but he's always used his charm and his sword skills to kind of maneuver through the world. And he thought that was enough. And he's had to be selfish in his life. So I think as we discover him and as he finds his journey through Nimue, he discovers how to be selfless and how to love, and that he actually has a big heart, and that he can be vulnerable in front of people, and that he's a very emotional guy at moments. And he realizes he actually does have a really good heart and wants the best for others, but it's hard for him to forgive himself, if that tells his story.
I'm also interested as your perspective as a man of color taking on a role in this very sort of entrenched traditional, it's not like we know what King Arthur looked like, but everybody sort of just always codes that figure as a white man. So what does it mean to you to sort of step into that space and be a completely different type of Arthur?
In a general sense, I think I loved Harry Potter. I loved Game of Thrones. I loved Lord of the Rings. Like, we all love them, but I, as a person of color, love them in a different way that I can never see myself in them. And if it was a character, they were never integral to the story. You could cut them out and it wouldn't shift the story in any way, really. That's why I'm so excited too. People ask me, oh, but it's a different take on Arthur. But I'm like, it's so exciting because Nimue's story hasn't been told, and we're discovering Arthur through Nimue as well. So it's it's so important. And it's one of those things where this is a myth, this is a legend, this is a character, Arthur, who no one knows if existed, but it was one of those things where the more stories we told, the greater the legend became. And people thought he was a bear. There's stories about him being a bear or a lion. So if a person of color, like if there's a magical sword, why can't there be a person of color to play Arthur? And I think it's one of those things where we need to have a more inclusive world within fantasy, because now we're starting to see within that, we're starting to see more people come within that world and more people enjoy it. And the more people we can enjoy it with, that's a great thing.
How did you approach putting your own stamp on such an iconic character that people feel like they already know?
The pressure is always on as an actor. And if you can't perform under pressure, you would sustain a professional career. So I'm used to that. And I'm not sure how much added pressure was there at play, considering it's such an iconic character, because he's already been interpreted in so many different ways. You know, we've seen him old, young, with a blue pointy hat, with a skull cap. We've seen him with a long white beard. So I felt like the playing field is already pretty open, you know. And then on top of that, already on the page, this is such a different and interesting take on the character. And it's so much fun. So I was like, okay, now I got to trust the originality of this interpretation.
I do feel like it's very different from the sort of default setting of Merlin, which is sort of this all-seeing, all-knowing, 12 steps ahead kind of figure. This one feels very human. And I think that was that more interesting to play than sort of, you know, Gandalf, but in Arthur.
Yeah, I think that's the brilliant take on it. Like he's very human and very flawed, and he's had a few centuries to get both flawed and human, and drunk. So like this is from Merlin's perspective, this is a story about, you know, redemption in a way. Find something again to live for, something worth fighting for. So I think it's a very beautiful story, and it's my job always to bring humanity and some sort of realness to my characters.
His relationship with Nimue is so interesting, and again, so different from the way that it is in the traditional tale. How do you think him discovering her impacts his journey going forward?
It changes it completely. I can't go into any spoilers here yet, but you know, as their relationship is revealed to him, you know, that's all of a sudden his life is completely changed forever. And that's also what at one point his friend, the widow, warns him about, that if he pursues this quest, he will ultimately, you know, suffer tremendously.
Like the sound of this video? All of our music was licensed from Soundstripe, a subscription-based royalty-free music library for filmmakers, podcasters, YouTubers, and more. Soundstripe. Keep creating.